Hello viewers, welcome to the Editorial Analysis by Drishti IAS. In this section, we regularly take editorials from various newspapers and news portals for a better understanding of various issues happening in India and around the globe. Dear viewers, in this section, we first try to link the editorial with our UPSC syllabus. Then we go analytical in order to understand some key points and at last some important concepts. Dear viewers, we truly hope that you like this initiative taken by Drishti IAS and your feedbacks are important for us. So kindly feel free to give your important feedbacks in the comment section. So without any further delay, let's commence our session.
Dear viewer, this video is available in Hindi as well. If you wish to watch it, please visit our Hindi YouTube channel, Drishti IAS. For your convenience, the link for this video in Hindi has been provided in the description below.
Today's editorial is taken from the Economic Times, published on 5th of February 2021. The title of today's editorial is Shot in the Arm for Banking Reforms. If we try to link today's editorial with our UPSC syllabus, we can link it with GS Paper 3, which has sections that include Indian economy and issues relating to planning and development. Some key points from today's editorial. The budget proposal to strengthen public sector banks are welcome. On the one hand, they seek to relieve banks of their bad loan burden by setting up an asset reconstruction company ARC and transferring the non-performing assets to the ARC. On the other, it proposes to augment bank capital eroded by provisioning against bad loans. One route to recapitalize the bank is for the governments to put in more capital. Now, we all know that in the budget speech given by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, she said that the budget has proposals in order to strengthen the public sector banks. One of the most important initiatives that has been taken here is about an asset reconstruction company, or the word that we have already seen, the bad bank. Okay, the term bad bank. Now, I told you in the editorial analysis of the budget that bad bank do not refers to something which is bad in nature. The bad bank, they will have their work. What exactly they will do is they will buy the NPAs from the banks, and then later on it will be the responsibility of such a bad bank to actually make sure that the entire NPA is being paid or is being actually received by them. I also told you, I also gave you an example. I said, let's say there's a bank with an NPA of around 500 crores. A bad bank will come into picture and will buy these NPA of 500 crores for, let's say, 200 or 250 crore or 300 crore rupees. Now, definitely it seems like when the NPA was of 500 crore and the bank is only getting 200, 250 or 300 crore rupees. So how exactly it is beneficial? But you have to look at the bigger picture. Now, initially, this entire 500 crore was of no use. But instead of getting this entire 500 crore, the government has somehow managed to get at least 200, 250 or 300 crore rupees. That means they have actually minimized the loss which they could have incurred. Now, the NPA which has been purchased by the bad bank, it will be the responsibility of the bad bank to actually manage and see how they can actually recover this entire NPA. So the bad bank will be like an asset reconstruction company. Now, one of the most important things, like I said, the biggest problem that the banks are facing right now are the bad loans. Now, one of the most easiest way through which it can be done is that the government can recapitalize. The government can put in capital into the public sector banks. The moment banks will have more capital, so that means they can definitely move forward and they can lend money to people. Another is to bring in fresh investors and bring the government stake below 50%. That is, privatize the bank in question. This is a welcome strategy. Now, the first strategy, like I said, that government should come and pour in some capital, whereas the second strategy is that government should sell its stake below 50%. That means yesterday we saw about disinvestment. Like I said, when the disinvestment was in such a situation where government still owns 51% or more of the organization's worth, there will be one particular kind of disinvestment. However, when the disinvestment done by government is more than 51%, that means government owns the lesser stake and the buyer owns the highest stake. It is called as majority disinvestment. And the third one was privatization, when the entire entity has been sold to a private organization. So the second way could be like to privatize bank. Government should actually sell its stake and the private players should be allowed to operate with new money, with new infrastructure, with new technology. Definitely it can help the banks to actually be in the situation they actually want to be. Banks would not lend unless afraid of their NPA burden. Now that's a very clear situation. If the banks have a continuously increasing NPA, there will be a time where the banks will stop lending. And that's something which will actually hamper the economy big time. Retaining ownership of some banks in the public sector and focusing on capital infusion to make them strong, while letting others be owned and controlled by non-state operators, would make them more robust as well. Now, we all know that the banks who are performing well, definitely their ownership should be remain with the government and government should pour in more capital in order to make them more stronger. However, those banks who are not performing well and are repeatedly increasing their NPA, they should be actually given to the private operators so that the private operators can work and maintain the situation of the bank once again. Now, before we move ahead, it is important for us to see what exactly is the issue of NPA in our country. What exactly is the problem? Now, if we speak about the financial stability report released by RBI, they have underlined the vulnerability of the Indian public sector banks. They have been under a severe balance sheet crisis even before the pandemic and the crisis created by the pandemic. And the moratorium offered will explode when the chickens come to roost. If we speak about the current banking scenario, the gross non-performing assets would go up to 11.3% in March 2020 to 15.2% in March 2021. Now, this is the expected figure. And to 16.3% under very severe scenario. The volume of recapitalization requirement is really humongous. Now, what exactly is a non-performing asset? Non-performing assets have been classified into three various categories. Number one, the substandard asset. Now, the substandard asset is an asset which has remained NPA for a period less than or equal to 12 months. Now, the second one is the doubtful asset. The doubtful asset, an asset which had remained in the substandard category for a period of 12 months. And if at last we speak about the third one, is the loss asset. The loss asset is considered uncollectible and of such little value that its continuance as bankable asset is not warranted. Now, it should be noted that for a bank, the loans given by the bank is considered as its asset. Now, whatever loans the bank disperses, they are actually considering it as an asset. So if the principal or the interest or both the components of a loan is not being serviced to the lender bank, then it would be considered as a non-performing asset. Any asset which stops giving return to its investor for a specified period of time is known as a non-performing asset. Generally, that specified period of time is 90 days in most of the countries and across various lending institutions. However, it is not a thumb rule and it may vary with the terms and conditions agreed upon by the financial institution and the borrower. Now, if we speak about what exactly are the reasons for rise of NPA in India, so there are several reasons. Number one, the slow and uneven legal system. The slow and the uneven legal system and very weak bankruptcy laws. One of the most important reasons. Number two, incompetence of traditional bank to make long-term loans for big infrastructure projects. Many banks are there who are incompetent in order to make long-term loans, especially required for infrastructure projects. The third one is slowdown in the global economy. One of the most important reasons, the economic slowdown that we all have been observing. Then we have the political pressure on the public sector banks to lend to big corporate. This issue should be noted. We have seen a various example, whether we speak about Vijay Mallya or the person, various cases we have seen. Okay, so in such cases, how actually they have got the money? They have received the money because the banks were actually given a lot of political pressure. Then is the irrational lending by the banks to business houses. We have seen the PNB scam in 2018. So sometimes the lending by the banks is very irrational. And at last, slow growth in sectors like infrastructure, mining, iron, steel, aviation, where the maximum loans are granted. So these are some of the reasons because of which the NPAs are continuously rising. Now, what exactly is the impact of the NPA? Now, the various impacts of NPA are: lenders suffer a lowering of profit margin. Number two, stress in banking sector causes less money available to fund other projects, therefore negative impact on the large national economy. Number three, higher interest rates by the bank to maintain profit margin. Number four, redirecting funds from the good projects to the bad ones. Now, this is something which is very important. Now, in order to make sure that the business operations are running smooth, what exactly banks do? Now, in order to cover up the NPAs, banks start following this thing, that they actually start taking, or the funds which were initially given for something, some infrastructural project, now those funds have been redirected in order to cover up the bad loans. As investment got stuck, it may result in unemployment as well. In the case of public sector banks, the bad health of banks means a bad return for a shareholder, which means that the government of India gets less money as dividend. Therefore, it may impact easy deployment of money for social and infrastructure development and results in social and political cost. Also, the investors who have invested in the banks, they do not get good return. The NPA related cases add more pressure to already pending cases with the judiciary. Now, there have been several initiatives which have been taken time and again by various governments. Now, one such situation was the corporate debt restructuring in 2005. Corporate debt restructuring. Now, it was actually meant for reducing the burden of the debt on the company by decreasing the rates paid and increasing the time the company has to pay the obligation back. Also, in 2014, a rule was introduced which was 5:25 rule. In 2014, it is also known as the flexible structuring of long-term project loans to infrastructure and core industries. It was proposed to maintain the cash flow of such companies since the project timeline is long and they do not get the money back into their books for a long time. Therefore, the requirement of loans at every 5 to 7 years and thus refinancing for long-term projects. Now, one more initiative was the Indradhanush framework in 2015. Now, the Indradhanush framework for transforming the public sector banks represents the most comprehensive reform effort undertaken since banking nationalization in the year 1970. Now, this is primarily done to revamp the public sector banks and to improve the overall performance by an idea known as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, what exactly it meant? A means appointment, B means bank board bureau, C means capitalization, D means distressing, E means employment, F means framework of accountability, and G means governance reforms. So viewers, this was something with reference to the NPA. What are the various issues associated? Let's move ahead. The present scenario: raising capital from the public will give the government more fiscal room, reduce the taxpayer burden to recapitalize banks, allow the public sector banks the freedom to go outside the trail of vigilance and fix their own remuneration plans. Not unexpectedly, bank unions want a rollback of the privatization plan. Now, we know one thing very clearly, that it is high time that government has to intervene and has to finance various banks. Now, there will be several aspects, but at the end of the situation, the banking sector will definitely achieve a lot more. However, if we follow the idea of privatization, the biggest challenge that the government will have to face will be the bank unions. The government must engage with the union. See, if the government really wants to go ahead with the idea of disinvestment or privatization, it is very important that they have to convince all these bank unions. They have to ensure that there will be a feeling, a sense of social security for all the employees who are working. An essential requirement is to improve the regulation and supervision framework that would make the nature of ownership inconsequential for the working of bank. Raising equity capital from the public via superior options to burdening the taxpayer for recapitalizing banks. Preferential allotment of shares to bank employees could smoothen the transition. Global capital is available now in plenty and is cheap. See, one thing that government can do is definitely some allotments of bank shares to the employees who are working will be a nice step. There has to be a proper supervision. Also, all the risk management, it should be calculated, and they should be in such a manner that the investor who is actually coming is confident that where he is investing his money is definitely going to be a very good deal in the time to come. If the internal management is not correct, then definitely it's not going to motivate at all the investor, and the situation of the bank will continue to remain what exactly it is. The way ahead, but PSBs need to overhaul their current decision making structure and culture. But there are several aspects. If the PSBs want that the situation should improve in the future, it is very important, it is very mandatory that the present decision making structure, the work culture, it has to improve, it has to change. One of the most important things that can be done is the market linked remuneration must replace the current and repressed salary. If we speak about the salaries that has been offered to the bank employees, now it is not up to the mark. Though banks have their own pay commissions, but yet if we look at the present scenario, the salaries are not that promising. So number one, we have to ensure that money is a great motivator. Money motivates people to do a lot of work. So yes, banks have to look into this situation. Fintech and a bond market should keep bank on their toes. See, financial technology is the new future. Fintech, a bond market. Banks have to come with various ideas, various bonds, various new technologies. Banks should be always available for any such challenge. And at last, the senior bankers must be tiered with the larger components linked to medium and long-term performance subject to clawback. One of the most important thing is the senior bankers, they should be provided with various different type of compensations on the basis of the performance for what they have actually done. Now, only and only if such situations, such initiatives are taken, only then the banking sector can observe reforms. Otherwise, the situation as we see today is definitely not going to be promising in the time to come. The only way to avoid such problem will be by taking proper decisions and proper initiative. So viewers, this was with today's editorial analysis. A question that can be framed with reference to today's analysis is, in the wake of the slowdown in economic activities due to the lockdown, the rise in the non-performing assets is inevitable. In this context, critically analyze the need for the bad bank. So viewers, I hope you liked today's editorial analysis. Thank you very much.